Michelle's hands trembled as she unlocked apartment 34B with 6 months of hidden cash and 3 years of surveillance finally behind her. Her ex had installed cameras in her bedroom, tracking software on her laptop, a GPS under her car, and she'd burned it all to disappear into Manhattan's most expensive building. Then the door across the hall opened. The man who stepped out had predator's eyes that locked onto the bruise on her wrist like he was memorizing evidence, and Michelle's stomach dropped. She didn't know her new neighbor ran the most feared Korean crime syndicate on the East Coast. She didn't know he'd already pulled her background check within an hour of her arrival. 6 days later, at 2:47 a.m., her phone lit up with a text that turned her blood to ice. "I know where you are." Michelle grabbed the kitchen knife with shaking hands, terror clawing up her throat as heavy footsteps echoed in the hallway, moving toward her door. When she pressed her eye to the peephole, it wasn't her ex standing there, it was her neighbor. Phone to his ear, speaking rapid Korean in a voice cold enough to kill, and she didn't understand the words, but she understood the promise behind them. Someone was about to pay for threatening what he'd already claimed as his. "Merry Christmas, family. I wish you a prosperous 2026. Please like, comment, and subscribe, as this is the best Christmas gift you could give this channel." The moment that changed everything happened on a Tuesday afternoon in her old apartment in Newark. Michelle had come home early from a client meeting, her portfolio tucked under her arm, mentally calculating whether the new logo design would cover next month's rent. She'd pushed open the door to find Marcus sitting at her laptop, his fingers frozen over the keyboard, guilt written across his face in letters she couldn't ignore anymore. "What are you doing?" The question came out smaller than she intended, fear already pooling in her stomach. Marcus had smiled, that charming smile that had drawn her in 3 years ago when she'd been a naive 23-year-old, fresh out of community college. "Just checking your email, baby. You left it open." But Michelle had been doing freelance graphic design long enough to recognize coding when she saw it. The screen showed lines of script, commands she didn't fully understand but knew had nothing to do with email. Her throat went dry as Marcus casually closed the laptop, standing to his full height of 6'2", using his body to intimidate her in the space that was supposed to be hers. "You're installing something," she said, hating how her voice shook. "I'm protecting you," he corrected, moving closer. "Do you know how many predators are online? I'm keeping you safe." That night, after Marcus had left for his shift at the warehouse, Michelle had taken her laptop to a coffee shop 3 blocks away and paid a tech student $50 to examine it. What he found made her skin crawl. Keylogging, software that recorded every password, location tracking that pinpointed her exact coordinates every 30 seconds, screen capture programs that took screenshots randomly. Even her webcam had been compromised, activated remotely without the indicator light showing. "How long has this been running?" she'd asked, already knowing she didn't want the answer. The student had checked the installation dates, his expression darkening. "At least 18 months, maybe longer. Whoever did this has access to everything. Your bank accounts, your emails, your client communications, everything." Michelle had walked home that night in a daze, her mind cataloguing every strange occurrence of the past year and a half. The job opportunity that fell through after the client mysteriously received emails she'd never sent. The friend who stopped talking to her after screenshots of their private conversation appeared online. The money that disappeared from her savings account in small increments she'd convinced herself she must have spent. Marcus had been inside her life like a virus, consuming everything, and she'd been too trusting to see it. She started planning her escape that very night, lying next to him in bed while he slept, every cell in her body screaming to run. But she knew better than to act impulsively. Marcus worked in logistics and had connections she didn't fully understand. He knew people who could find people. So Michelle became strategic, playing the role of the devoted girlfriend while secretly dismantling the cage he'd built around her. She opened a new bank account at a different institution, having her freelance payments deposited there while keeping just enough in the old account to avoid suspicion. She bought a burner phone with cash and kept it hidden in a tampon box under the bathroom sink, somewhere Marcus would never look. She researched apartments in neighborhoods he'd never think to search, luxury buildings where the security was tight and the rent was astronomical. Every day for 6 months, Michelle smiled and kissed Marcus goodbye, then spent her waking hours preparing for the moment she'd disappear. She took on extra projects, working until her eyes burned, saving every dollar. She wiped her social media presence clean, telling friends she was taking a digital detox. She changed her passwords on a public library computer, routing her important emails through encrypted services Marcus couldn't access. The hardest part was acting normal, pretending she didn't see the monster sitting across from her at dinner, the man who thought he owned her because he'd spent years burrowing into every aspect of her existence. The breaking point came when she found the GPS tracker under her car, a small black device magnetically attached to the undercarriage. Michelle had been getting an oil change, and the mechanic had pointed it out, asking if she knew it was there. She'd lied and said yes, her hands shaking so badly she could barely sign the invoice. That night, she made her final preparations. She packed a single suitcase with essentials, choosing only items Marcus wouldn't immediately notice were missing. She drafted an email to her clients, explaining she'd be unreachable for a few weeks due to family emergency. She transferred the last of her hidden savings to cash, walking out of the bank with nearly $8,000 in $100 bills tucked into her purse. Marcus was working a night shift when Michelle left. She'd timed it perfectly, knowing he wouldn't be home until 6 the next morning. She wiped down her laptop one final time, destroying the hard drive with a hammer before tossing it in a dumpster 5 blocks away. She'd already bought a new one, registered under a pseudonym, paid for with cash at a store that didn't check ID. The taxi ride to Manhattan felt surreal, the city lights blurring as they crossed the bridge from Newark into a new life. Michelle had chosen the apartment site unseen, based solely on the building's security features. Facial recognition entry, 24-hour doorman, cameras in every hallway. The rent would consume most of her savings within 4 months, but she needed that buffer, needed the illusion of safety that came with marble lobbies and rich neighbours who didn't ask questions. She'd moved in at 3 in the morning, the building mercifully quiet except for the night doorman who'd helped her with her single suitcase. Antonio, his name tag had read, and he'd smiled kindly without prying into why a young black woman was moving into a luxury building in the dead of night with no furniture and barely any luggage. "Welcome to Celestial Towers, Miss Thompson," he'd said, handing her the key. "You need anything, you just call down." Michelle had thanked him, her voice barely working, and taken the elevator to the 34th floor. The hallway had been silent, expensive artwork on the walls, thick carpet muffling her footsteps. She'd found 34B at the end of the corridor, her hands shaking as she worked the key into the lock. The apartment was empty, just polished hardwood floors and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Michelle had stood there in the darkness, her suitcase at her feet, and cried for the first time in months. Relief and terror warred in her chest, because she was free, but she knew Marcus well enough to know he wouldn't let her go easily. She'd slept on the floor that first night, too exhausted to care about comfort, using her jacket as a pillow. Tomorrow she'd buy an air mattress and some basics. Tomorrow she'd start rebuilding, but tonight she just needed to exist in a space where nobody was watching. The morning sun had woken her, bright and unforgiving through the uncovered windows. Michelle had stretched her stiff muscles and stood, looking out at Manhattan spread below her like a promise. For the first time in 3 years, she felt like she could breathe. That illusion shattered the moment she opened her door to explore the building and came face to face with her neighbour. He'd been stepping out of 34A just as she emerged, and they'd nearly collided in the hallway. Michelle had jerked back instinctively, her body remembering to fear men who moved with that kind of controlled power. He was tall, not as tall as Marcus, but his presence filled the space differently. He wore a charcoal suit that probably cost more than her entire year's rent, tailored perfectly to his frame. His black hair was styled back from his face, revealing sharp features and eyes so dark they looked black in the hallway lighting. "Sorry," Michelle had stammered, pressing herself against her doorframe. The man had stopped, studying her with an intensity that made her skin prickle. His gaze travelled from her face down to her wrist, where the bruise Marcus had left 3 days ago still bloomed purple and yellow. She'd tried to hide it with a long-sleeved shirt, but the fabric had ridden up when she'd reached for the doorknob. "You're the new neighbour," he said, his voice accented but smooth, each word deliberate. "Yes, I'm Michelle. I just moved in last night." "Juwan Kang." He extended his hand, and Michelle hesitated before taking it. His grip was firm but not crushing, his skin warm against hers. "Welcome to the building." "Thank you." She pulled her hand back quickly, tugging her sleeve down over the bruise. Chaewon's eyes followed the movement, and something flickered across his face too quickly for her to read. "If you need anything, I'm right across the hall." It should have been a neighbourly offer, but the way he said it felt like something else entirely, a promise or a warning. Michelle couldn't tell which. She'd nodded mutely and retreated into her apartment, closing the door and leaning against it with her heart racing. Through the peephole, she'd watched him stand there for a moment longer, his expression unreadable, before he walked toward the elevator, with the kind of controlled grace that spoke of someone used to commanding attention. Michelle had spent the rest of that day setting up the basics. She'd ordered an air mattress online for same-day delivery and bought sheets from a nearby store, paying cash. She'd purchased a small desk and chair, the bare minimum she needed to work. Her new laptop remained in its box, still sealed as she debated whether to even set it up. The violation of her privacy had left scars deeper than any physical mark Marcus had given her. By evening, she'd created a semblance of home. The air mattress was inflated in the bedroom, her few clothes hung in the massive walk-in closet that felt absurdly large for her meagre wardrobe. She'd bought groceries and stocked the kitchen, standing in front of the refrigerator and marvelling at the simple act of choosing what to eat without someone monitoring her purchases. That night, Michelle had cooked herself dinner, a simple pasta dish she'd always loved but Marcus had hated. She'd eaten it sitting on her air mattress, looking out at the city lights, feeling simultaneously liberated and terrified. Somewhere out there, Marcus was discovering she was gone. She'd left no note, no explanation, just vanished like she'd never existed. Part of her felt guilty for that, the part that had been conditioned to prioritize his feelings over her safety. The rest of her knew she owed him nothing, especially not a forwarding address to hunt her down. She'd washed her single plate and fork, changed into pajamas and tried to sleep. But every sound in the building made her jump. The elevator dinging, footsteps in the hallway, the distant sound of a door closing. Her body remained on high alert, waiting for Marcus to somehow materialize and drag her back into the nightmare. Around midnight, she'd finally drifted off, exhaustion winning over anxiety. The next few days had passed in a strange blur of routine and hypervigilance. Michelle had established patterns, waking early to work on design projects, taking breaks to walk the neighbourhood and learn the streets. She'd changed her appearance subtly, cutting her hair shorter and dyeing it a darker brown. She'd bought new clothes. Nothing flashy but different enough from her old style that someone looking for her might not recognise her immediately. She'd seen Chaewon in passing a few times, Once in the lobby, when she was leaving for a coffee shop, him entering with a group of serious-looking men in suits. He'd caught her eye and nodded, the gesture slight but deliberate. Another time in the elevator, just the two of them in uncomfortable silence as they rode down from the 34th floor. He'd asked how she was settling in, and she'd given generic answers, aware of how his presence made her nervous in a way that was different from fear. It was attraction, she'd realised with dismay. Despite everything, despite swearing off men and relationships and trust, her body responded to Juwan Kang like he was gravity itself. The way he moved, the quiet authority in his voice, the intensity of his attention when those dark eyes focused on her, it was dangerous and stupid, and she absolutely could not afford to indulge it. On her 4th day in the apartment, Michelle had been working at her makeshift desk when a knock startled her. She'd frozen, her mind immediately jumping to worst-case scenarios. Through the peephole, she'd seen Antonio the doorman, holding a large gift basket. "Delivery for you, Miss Thompson," he'd called out. Michelle had opened the door cautiously. "I didn't order anything. It's from Mr. Kang across the hall. A welcome to the building gift." Antonio had handed her the basket, beautifully arranged with wine, chocolates, and gourmet foods she'd never buy for herself. She'd thanked him and brought it inside, staring at the basket like it might explode. There was a card tucked among the items, expensive cardstock with simple black text. "Welcome home. If you need anything, day or night, I'm across." The gesture should have been thoughtful, neighbourly even, but Michelle couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to it. The phrase day or night felt weighted with meaning she couldn't quite grasp. And how had he known her last name? She'd only given him her first name during their brief introduction. That night, she'd knocked on his door to thank him, politeness winning over paranoia. Juwan had answered wearing casual clothes, dark jeans and a fitted black shirt, his hair slightly dishevelled like he'd been running his hands through it. Behind him, she'd glimpsed an apartment that looked nothing like hers. Where hers was empty and sparse, his was furnished with expensive minimalism, all clean lines and dark wood. "Thank you for the basket," Michelle had said, very aware that she was wearing old yoga pants and a faded college sweatshirt. "You didn't have to do that." "I wanted to." He'd leaned against the doorframe, and she'd noticed a tattoo peeking out from under his sleeve, dark ink she couldn't quite make out. "This building can feel isolating. I thought a welcome gesture was appropriate." "It's very generous. How are you settling in?" His eyes had scanned her face, searching for something. "Do you feel safe here?" The question had caught her off guard, too specific to be casual. "Why would you ask that?" "You seem like someone who's running from something." Juwan's voice had been gentle but direct. "I recognize the signs." Michelle's defences had slammed up. "I don't know what you mean. The bruise on your wrist, the way you check over your shoulder, the fact that you moved in at 3 a.m. with one suitcase." He'd paused, letting that sink in. "I'm not judging, Michelle. I'm offering help if you need it." "I can take care of myself." The words had come out sharper than intended. "I'm sure you can." He'd straightened, and she'd realised how close they were standing, close enough that she could smell his cologne, something expensive and subtle. "But everyone needs allies. Consider me yours." Before she could respond, he'd stepped back and gently closed the door, leaving her standing in the hallway with more questions than answers. That conversation had replayed in her mind for hours afterward. How did he know she'd moved in at 3 a.m? Had Antonio told him? And why did he care? Men like Juwan Kang, men who lived in luxury apartments and wore suits that cost thousands, didn't concern themselves with troubled neighbours unless they wanted something. Michelle had tried to push it from her mind, focusing instead on her work. She'd landed a new client, a small startup that needed branding, and threw herself into the project. The days had begun to blur together, each one bringing a little more confidence, a little more belief that she'd actually pulled off her escape. Then came day 6. Michelle had been sleeping deeply, the first real rest she'd gotten since leaving Newark, when her phone had buzzed, on the floor next to her air mattress. She'd fumbled for it in the darkness, squinting at the bright screen. 2:47 a.m., unknown number. The text message had made her blood freeze. "I know where you are." Michelle had sat up, her heart hammering against her ribs. She'd stared at those 5 words until they blurred, her mind racing through possibilities. It could be spam, it could be a wrong number. It could be anything except what she knew in her gut it was. Marcus had found her. A second text came through. "Did you really think you could hide from me, baby? Manhattan's not that big." Michelle's hands had started shaking so badly, she'd almost dropped the phone. She'd gotten up, pacing her empty apartment, trying to think. How had he gotten her new number? She'd been so careful, unless he'd somehow tracked her purchase of the burner phone, or followed her to the store, or had connections she didn't know about. A third text. "I'm coming for you. We're going to have a long talk about respect and loyalty." Terror had clawed its way up her throat. Michelle had grabbed the kitchen knife from the drawer, the only weapon she had, and stood in her living room trying to decide what to do. Call the police? And tell them what? Her ex-boyfriend had sent threatening texts. They'd tell her to file a report and send her on her way. Marcus had never been arrested, never officially done anything that would make the cops take her seriously. That's when she'd heard the footsteps in the hallway, heavy, deliberate, moving toward her door. Michelle had crept to the peephole, the knife gripped in her sweating palm, and looked out. Her knees had nearly buckled with relief when she saw it wasn't Marcus. It was Juwan. He'd been dressed in all black, different from his usual expensive suits, and he'd been on his phone speaking rapid Korean. Even through the thick door, she'd heard the ice in his voice, the deadly calm that promised violence. He'd been standing directly in front of her door, as if guarding it, his body angled toward the elevator, like he was waiting for someone to step out. Michelle had watched, transfixed, as he'd continued speaking. She'd caught a few words that sounded like commands, sharp and final. Then he'd ended the call and stood there in silence, checking his watch, his posture radiating controlled lethality. After a moment, he'd turned and looked directly at her peephole, as if he could sense her watching. "Michelle," he'd said quietly, his voice carrying through the door, "open up, we need to talk." Her hand had hovered over the deadbolt, logic warring with instinct. Every self-preservation instinct screamed not to open the door to a man she barely knew in the middle of the night. But something about the way he stood there, protective rather than threatening, made her decision. She'd unlocked the door and pulled it open, still gripping the knife. Juwan's eyes had dropped to the weapon in her hand, then back to her face. "That's not going to be necessary. I'm here to help." "How did you know?" Her voice had come out as barely a whisper. "I had someone monitoring communications to this building. Your ex sent those texts from a burner phone, but he was stupid enough to do it while connected to a cell tower in Queens." Juwan had stepped closer, and Michelle had let him, too shaken to maintain boundaries. "He's not coming here tonight. My people are handling it." "Your people?" Michelle had echoed, confused and overwhelmed. "Let me inside and I'll explain everything." He'd glanced down the hallway, then back at her. "Please, Michelle, trust me." She'd stepped aside, letting him into her sparse apartment. He'd taken in the air mattress, the single desk, the bare walls, his expression unreadable. Michelle had closed the door and faced him, still holding the knife like a talisman. "You need to sit down," Juwan had said gently, gesturing toward her mattress. "I'll stand." He'd nodded, respecting her choice. "Your ex-boyfriend's name is Marcus Chen. He's 29, works in logistics for a shipping company with suspected ties to theft and resale of goods. He's been arrested twice for assault, but never charged due to victims refusing to testify. He installed surveillance equipment in your home and has been stalking you for at least 2 years. Michelle's mind had reeled. How do you know all of this? I had you investigated the day you moved in. Juwan had said it matter-of-factly, as if it was the most normal thing in the world. I needed to understand who you were and what you were running from. Anger had flared through her fear. You had no right. You're correct. I didn't. But I saw the bruise on your wrist and the fear in your eyes, and I've seen what happens when women in your situation are left to face their abusers alone. His voice had gone quiet, heavy with something that sounded like old pain. I wasn't going to let that happen to you. Why? Michelle had demanded. Why do you care? You don't know me. Juwan had been silent for a long moment, and when he spoke, his voice carried the weight of confession. My younger sister was killed by her boyfriend 6 years ago. She'd tried to leave him multiple times, and each time he found her and dragged her back. The last time, he made sure she couldn't leave again. The knife had lowered in Michelle's hand as the fight drained out of her. I'm sorry. Don't be sorry. Be smart. He'd taken a step closer and she'd let him enter her space, drawn by the intensity in his eyes. Marcus Chen is not going to stop. Men like him never do unless someone makes them. So I'm giving you a choice, Michelle. You can go to the police, file reports, get restraining orders that he'll violate. You can live in fear, constantly looking over your shoulder. Or you can let me handle this. Handle it how? She'd asked, though part of her already knew the answer. By making it clear that you're under my protection and anyone who threatens you will have to go through me, and trust me, nobody wants to do that. Michelle had stared at him, this dangerous stranger offering salvation with blood on his hands. Everything about the situation screamed that she should refuse, should run, should not trade one controlling man for another. But Juwan wasn't Marcus. The way he looked at her held respect, not ownership. He was offering protection, not possession. What do you want in return? She'd asked, because nothing came free. Nothing. The answer had been immediate. I don't operate that way, especially not with women who've already been used by men who thought they owned them. I don't understand you. Michelle had set the knife down on her desk, her hands still trembling. Why would you do this for a stranger? Juwan had moved closer, and she'd found herself tilting her head back to maintain eye contact. Because I failed my sister, and I can't fail again. Because you deserve to live without fear. Because the moment I saw you, I knew you were someone worth protecting. He'd paused, something vulnerable flickering across his face. And maybe because you're not a stranger. Not really. Not anymore. The air between them had felt charged, electric, with possibility and danger. Michelle's breath had caught as Juwan reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and gently pushed a strand of hair behind her ear. His fingers had barely grazed her skin, but the touch had sent shivers down her spine. Let me keep you safe, he'd murmured, his voice dropping lower. That's all I'm asking. Michelle had known she should say no, should maintain distance, should not let this intense, dangerous man insert himself into her life. But fear and exhaustion and something deeper, something hungry for the safety he offered, had won out. Okay, she'd whispered. Okay. Juwan had smiled then, a real smile that transformed his face from intimidating to devastating. Good, now. You're going to pack a bag and stay in my guest room tonight. It's safer until I know Marcus won't try anything stupid. I can't just... Michelle. His hand had cupped her cheek, thumb brushing across her skin in a gesture too intimate for strangers. Please don't fight me on this. I need to know you're safe. The I need had undone her. Michelle had nodded, and within 10 minutes, she'd been standing in Juwan's apartment with her small overnight bag, staring at luxury she could never afford. His guest room was twice the size of her bedroom, with a king bed and attached bathroom that looked like something from a magazine. There's a lock on the inside if it makes you feel better, Juwan had said from the doorway. You can trust me, but I understand if you need that boundary. Michelle had looked at him, really looked at him, seeing past the expensive clothes and dangerous edge to the man underneath. Thank you, she'd said, meaning it. Get some sleep. We'll talk more in the morning. He'd started to leave, but Michelle had called out, Juwan, what did you mean when you said your people were handling it? He'd turned back, his expression going cold in a way that should have terrified her. It means Marcus Chen is currently sitting in a holding cell in Queens, arrested for outstanding warrants he didn't know existed. It means his car was found with evidence of stolen goods. It means his life just became very complicated and he's going to be too busy dealing with legal problems to come after you. You did all of that in 20 minutes? I have excellent resources. Juwan's smile had been sharp as a blade. And I told you, Michelle, anyone who threatens you has to go through me. Marcus Chen just learned what that means. He'd closed the door then, leaving her alone in the luxurious guest room, her mind spinning with everything that had just happened. Michelle had locked the door just to feel some semblance of control and climbed into the softest bed she'd ever felt. As she drifted off to sleep, safer than she'd felt in years, one thought had circled her mind. She'd escaped one dangerous man only to fall under the protection of another. The difference was, this one made her feel safe and terrified and alive all at once, and she had no idea what to do with that. If you are enjoying this story and want to see what happens next, please hit that like button. Drop a comment telling me your thoughts and subscribe so you never miss an upload. Your support means everything to this channel. Thank you. Michelle woke to sunlight streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows and the smell of coffee drifting under the door. For a moment, disoriented, she forgot where she was. Then the events of the previous night came rushing back, and she sat up, her heart racing. She was in Juwan's apartment. He'd arrested Marcus somehow. He'd promised to protect her. Michelle climbed out of bed and caught sight of herself in the mirror. Her hair was wild, her eyes still heavy with sleep, and she was wearing the same worn pajamas she'd thrown on in panic. Not exactly the image she wanted to present, but vanity seemed ridiculous given everything else. She unlocked the door cautiously and stepped into the hallway. Juwan's apartment in daylight was even more impressive than she'd realised. Exposed brick walls, modern art that probably cost more than her car, furniture that looked custom-made. Everything was in shades of black, grey and deep blue, masculine and understated, but undeniably expensive. She found him in the kitchen, standing at the stove cooking breakfast. He'd changed into fresh clothes, dark slacks, and a white dress shirt with the sleeves rolled up, revealing the tattoo she'd glimpsed before. It was a full sleeve, intricate Korean designs she couldn't make out from across the room. Good morning, Juwan said without turning around. I made coffee. Mugs are in the cabinet to your left. Michelle retrieved a mug, pouring herself coffee from the expensive machine on the counter. She took a sip, and it was the best coffee she'd ever tasted, rich and smooth. You didn't have to cook. I wanted to. He plated eggs and toast, adding fresh fruit. Sit, we need to talk. Michelle perched on one of the bar stools at the kitchen island, watching as he brought over 2 plates. He sat across from her, and in the morning light, she noticed details she'd missed before, a small scar above his left eyebrow. The way his eyes weren't quite black, but the darkest brown she'd ever seen. The precise way he moved, economical and controlled. Marcus is still in custody, Juwan said, picking up his fork. He'll be there for at least 72 hours while they process him. After that, he'll likely make bail, but it'll be expensive enough to drain his resources. You framed him. Michelle said it as a statement, not a question. I didn't have to frame him. He was already guilty of multiple crimes. I simply made sure the evidence reached the right people. Juwan met her eyes. Does that bother you? Michelle thought about it, really thought about it. Marcus in jail meant she could breathe. meant she had time to think and plan without fear. No, she admitted, it doesn't. Does that make me a bad person? It makes you human. He took a bite of eggs. Eat. You need your strength. They ate in comfortable silence, and Michelle found herself studying him. Jaewon moved with the confidence of someone who'd never doubted his place in the world. But there was something underneath that, a darkness she recognized because she'd seen it in her own mirror, pain that had carved deep grooves into his soul. Tell me about your sister, she said quietly. Jaewon's fork paused halfway to his mouth. He set it down carefully, his jaw tightening. Her name was Min-ji. She was 22 when she died, beautiful and smart and so full of life it hurt to be around her. His voice went rough. She met him at university. He seemed perfect at first, charming and attentive. By the time we realized what he was doing to her, she was so deep in his control, she couldn't see a way out. You tried to help her. I tried everything. Offered her money, a new apartment, a job at my company, but he'd convinced her she was nothing without him, that no one else would want her. Jaewon's hands clenched into fists on the counter. The last time she tried to leave, he beat her so badly she was in the hospital for 2 weeks. When she got out, she went back to him. 2 months later, she was dead. Michelle reached across the counter without thinking, covering his fist with her hand. I'm so sorry. Jaewon looked down at their hands, then slowly turned his palm up, lacing his fingers through hers. The gesture felt monumental, intimate in a way that had nothing to do with attraction. I swore after Min-ji died that I would never let another woman suffer like she did if I had the power to stop it. So when I saw the fear and the bruise and the way you checked the hallway, before closing your door, I knew I had to act. Most people would have just called the police. I'm not most people, Michelle. He squeezed her hand gently. I have resources they don't, connections they can't access, and I'm willing to cross lines they won't. What kind of lines? She needed to know exactly who she was trusting. Jaewon was quiet for a moment, and when he spoke, his voice carried the weight of confession. I run a business empire that operates in grey areas, import-export on the surface, but underneath, there are elements that law enforcement would find very interesting. I have people who handle problems quietly and efficiently. I make deals that would never hold up in court, but are binding in ways that matter more. You're in the mafia. Michelle said it calmly, and Jaewon's eyes widened slightly in surprise. That's a very Western term for a very Korean organization, but essentially, yes. Michelle should have pulled her hand away, should have run back to her apartment and locked the door. Instead, she asked, Have you ever killed anyone? Yes. No hesitation, no justification, just honest truth. People who deserved it. In my world, deserve is a complicated word, but I've never hurt anyone innocent. Everyone I've dealt with knew the risks they were taking. Michelle absorbed that, turning it over in her mind. Jaewon was dangerous. That much was clear, but he was dangerous to people who threatened him or those under his protection. She'd seen enough of Marcus's cruelty to know that sometimes the law wasn't enough. That sometimes you needed someone willing to step outside its boundaries. I should be scared of you, she said softly. But you're not. Jaewon turned her hand over, his thumb tracing patterns on her palm. Why? Because you had every opportunity to hurt me, and instead you made me breakfast. Michelle met his eyes. Because you see me as a person, not a possession. Because when you look at me, I don't feel small. Something shifted in Jaewon's expression, hunger flickering in those dark eyes. He stood slowly, moving around the counter until he was standing in front of her. Michelle's breath caught as he reached up, cupping her face with both hands. You have no idea what you do to me, he murmured, his voice rough. I've spent 6 years building walls around myself, and you walked through them like they didn't exist. Jaewon. He leaned down, his forehead resting against hers, close enough that she could feel his breath. Tell me to stop. Tell me this is too fast, too much, too complicated. Tell me you don't feel this too. Michelle's hands came up, gripping his wrists, but she didn't push him away. I can't tell you that because I'd be lying. The kiss happened in a heartbeat. One moment they were breathing the same air, tension coiling between them, and the next his lips were on hers, demanding and gentle all at once. Michelle made a sound low in her throat, her fingers sliding into his hair as she kissed him back with 3 years of loneliness and fear channeled into desperate need. Jaewon groaned, one hand sliding into her hair while the other gripped her waist, pulling her closer. The kiss deepened, and Michelle felt herself melting against him, every nerve ending alive with sensation. This was nothing like kissing Marcus, nothing like the obligation and performance. This was raw and real and terrifying in its intensity. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Jaewon rested his forehead against hers again. We should slow down, he said, though his hands didn't release her. Probably, Michelle agreed, though she made no move to step back. You've been through trauma. You need time to heal, not get involved with someone like me. Stop telling me what I need. Michelle pulled back enough to look him in the eyes. I spent 3 years with someone who decided what I needed, what I wanted, what I was allowed to feel. Don't do that to me. Chaewon's expression softened. You're right. I'm sorry. He brushed his thumb across her lower lip, and she shivered. But I need you to understand what getting involved with me means. My life is complicated and dangerous. People want what I have, and they won't hesitate to use anyone close to me as leverage. So you're saying I'd be in danger? I'm saying I would protect you with everything I have. But yes, there's risk. He stroked her cheek. I'm giving you the choice, Michelle. Walk away now, and I'll still make sure Marcus never bothers you again. Or stay, and accept that this thing between us is going to be intense and complicated, and possibly the most dangerous decision you've ever made. Michelle thought about her empty apartment across the hall, the air mattress on the floor, the careful isolation she'd built. She thought about spending her life looking over her shoulder, always afraid, always alone. Then she looked at Jaewon, this dangerous man offering her safety and passion and the terrifying possibility of something real. I choose this, she whispered. I choose you. The relief on his face was palpable. He kissed her again, softer this time, reverent. You won't regret it. I better not, Michelle said, trying for levity even as her heart raced. Because if you turn out to be another mistake, I'm going to be really mad at myself. Chaewon laughed, the sound rich and genuine. I'll do my best not to disappoint you. The next few days passed in a blur of new routines and growing intimacy. Michelle moved back into her apartment but spent most of her time in Jaewon's, drawn there by his presence and the safety it represented. He worked from home when he could, taking calls in Korean and English, managing his empire from a home office that looked like something from a spy movie. Michelle worked on her design projects at his dining table, and they'd fall into easy conversation during breaks. She learned he was 32, that he'd taken over his family's organisation when his father died, that he'd been groomed for this life since childhood. He learned she was 26, that she'd grown up in foster care with no family. That graphic design was her escape and her passion. Their relationship deepened through small moments. Chaewon bringing her coffee exactly how she liked it without asking. Michelle cooking dinner when he worked late. Filling his pristine kitchen with warmth and the smell of home cooking. The way he'd come up behind her while she worked, dropping a kiss on her shoulder before disappearing back to his office. The touches became more frequent, more deliberate. His hand on her lower back as they walked, her fingers running through his hair while they watched movies on his massive couch. Kisses that started innocent but quickly turned heated, both of them pulling back before things went too far, aware that they were building something that needed a foundation stronger than just physical attraction. A week after Michelle had moved in, Jaewon's second-in-command came to the apartment. Junho was in his early 30s, built like a tank with a friendly smile that didn't quite reach his calculating eyes. He bowed respectfully to Michelle when they were introduced, and she caught the flash of surprise on his face that his boss had a woman in his space. They spoke in Korean in Jaewon's office, voices low, and Michelle tried not to eavesdrop from the living room. When Junho left, Jaewon emerged looking troubled. "What's wrong?" Michelle asked, setting down her sketchpad. "Marcus made bail. He's out." Fear spiked through her chest. "When?" "This morning." Jaewon crossed to her, kneeling beside the couch so they were eye level. "Listen to me carefully. He won't get near you. I've had surveillance on him since he was released. He's being watched 24/7. What if he comes here? Then he'll have to get through building security, which has been briefed on him and has his photo. He'll have to get past me, which won't happen. And he'll have to deal with the fact that touching you means starting a war he can't win." Jaewon took her hands. "I need you to trust me, Michelle. Can you do that?" Michelle wanted to say yes easily, but trust was complicated when you'd had it shattered. "I'm trying," she said honestly, "but I'm scared." "I know, and that's okay." He pulled her into his arms, and she went willingly, pressing her face against his chest. Fear keeps you alert. Just don't let it paralyze you. That night, Michelle couldn't sleep. She lay in Jaewon's guest room, staring at the ceiling, every sound making her jump. Around 2 a.m, she gave up and padded out to the living room, wrapping herself in a blanket on the couch. She must have dozed off because she woke to Jaewon sitting beside her, his hand stroking her hair. "Nightmare?" he asked softly. "Couldn't sleep." Michelle sat up, and he pulled her against his side. "I keep thinking about him out there looking for me. He's at his apartment in Queens. He's not moving." "How do you know that?" Jaewon pulled out his phone, showing her a live feed from what appeared to be a security camera. It showed Marcus's building, a timestamp in the corner. "I told you, he's being watched." Michelle stared at the screen, a mix of relief and unease churning in her gut. "That's terrifying and comforting at the same time." "Welcome to my world." Jaewon set the phone aside. "Everything I do walks that line." Michelle turned to face him properly. "Don't you ever want a normal life, without the danger and the surveillance and the constant vigilance?" "Sometimes," he admitted, "usually late at night when I can't sleep. I imagine what it would be like to just be Jaewon Kang, businessman, instead of Jaewon Kang, heir to a criminal empire. But then morning comes, and I remember that this life gave me the resources to protect people who need it. If I walked away, what would happen to people like you? There are other ways to help people. Not as effectively. Not as permanently." He tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. "I know what I am, Michelle. I'm not a good man, but I try to use what I have to do some good in the world." "You are a good man," Michelle said firmly. "You're just a good man who does bad things to worse people." Jaewon smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "You see me through rose-coloured glasses. I see you clearly." She shifted closer, her hand resting on his chest. "I see someone who lost his sister and turned that pain into purpose. Someone who protects the vulnerable even when it complicates his life. Someone who makes me feel safe for the first time in years." "Michelle," her name came out rough, laden with emotion. "Kiss me," she whispered. He did, and it was different from before, slower, deeper, like he was pouring everything he couldn't say into the connection between them. Michelle's fingers curled into his shirt, and when they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Jaewon pressed his forehead to hers. "Stay with me tonight," he murmured. "Just sleep. I just want you close." Michelle nodded, and he led her to his bedroom, a space she hadn't seen before. It was as minimalist as the rest of his apartment, dominated by a massive bed with dark sheets. Jaewon pulled back the covers, and they climbed in together, Michelle curling against his side. "This is probably a bad idea," she said, but she didn't move. "Probably the worst I've ever had." His arm tightened around her. "But I'm not letting you go." Michelle fell asleep listening to his heartbeat, feeling safer than she had any right to feel, in the arms of a man whose world was built on violence and power. The next morning she woke up alone. There was a note on the pillow. "Had to handle business. Back by lunch. Don't leave the apartment. JW." Michelle showered and dressed, helping herself to breakfast in Jaewon's kitchen. She was sketching at the dining table when her phone rang. Unknown number. Her stomach dropped, but she answered. "Hello? Michelle?" Marcus's voice sent ice through her veins. "We need to talk." "I have nothing to say to you." "That's where you're wrong, baby. See, I know you're with him. The Korean guy, your neighbor." Marcus's voice dripped venom. "Do you really think he cares about you? Men like that don't date girls like you. They use them and throw them away. You don't know anything about him. I know he's dangerous. I know he's got connections that had me arrested on bogus charges, and I know he's going to get bored of you eventually, and then where will you be?" Michelle's hand shook, but she kept her voice steady. "Anywhere but with you." "I loved you," Marcus shouted, the facade cracking. "I gave you everything, protected you, took care of you, and this is how you repay me, by running off with some rich criminal. You controlled me, you spied on me, you hit me." Michelle's voice rose despite her best efforts. "That's not love, Marcus. That's abuse. I'm giving you one chance, Michelle. Leave him. Come back to me. We can start over, and I'll forgive you for everything." "No." The word came out strong, sure. "I'm never coming back. Leave me alone, or I swear I'll make sure you regret it." "You can't threaten me. You're nothing without me." "Actually," a cold voice said from behind Michelle, making her jump, "she's everything without you, and you're about to be nothing at all." Michelle spun to find Jaewon standing in the doorway, his expression murderous. He crossed to her in 3 strides, taking the phone from her hand. "Marcus Chen," he said into the phone, his voice like ice. "This is Jaewon Kang. I'm going to explain something to you very clearly, so listen carefully. Michelle is under my protection. That means she's untouchable. If you call her again, if you text her, if you so much as think about her, I will destroy everything you have, your job, your apartment, your freedom. I will make sure every person you've ever hurt comes forward. I will ensure that you spend the next decade in prison. Do you understand?" Michelle couldn't hear Marcus's response, but Jaewon's smile was terrifying. "Good. Now delete this number. Delete every photo and contact you have of Michelle and pretend she never existed, because if you don't, I'll make you wish you had." He ended the call and crushed the phone in his hand, the plastic cracking. Michelle stared at him, adrenaline and something else flooding her system. "You broke my phone," she said numbly. "I'll buy you a new one, a better one with a number he doesn't have." Jaewon set the destroyed phone on the table. "Are you okay? He knows about you, about us." "I know. He's been watching the building." Jaewon's jaw tightened. "I was handling it, but clearly not fast enough." "What are you going to do?" "What I should have done from the beginning." He pulled out his own phone, making a call. He spoke in rapid Korean, short and commanding. When he hung up, he looked at Michelle. "By tomorrow morning, Marcus Chen will be on a plane to California with a new job offer he can't refuse. He'll be watched there. And if he even looks like he's planning to come back to New York, he'll be dealt with permanently. You can't just relocate someone across the country. I can, and I am." Jaewon cupped her face. "I'm done playing nice, Michelle. He threatened you. He scared you. That ends now. Michelle should have been horrified by the casual way he wielded his power. Instead, she felt relief washing over her. "Thank you," she whispered. "Don't thank me for this. This is the bare minimum of what I'd do for you." He kissed her forehead. "Now come here, you're shaking." She hadn't realized she was. Jaewon pulled her into his arms and Michelle buried her face in his chest, breathing in his scent. "I hate that I still let him affect me," she said. "Trauma doesn't just disappear because you want it to. It takes time to heal." His hand stroked her back. "But you're safe now. I promise you, Michelle. You're safe." Over the next 2 weeks, Michelle's life transformed in ways she couldn't have imagined. Jaewon was true to his word about Marcus, who was relocated to Los Angeles with a generous job offer at a company Jaewon owned through shell corporations. Michelle knew she should feel guilty about manipulating someone's life like that, but every day, without fear, was a gift she couldn't bring herself to refuse. Her relationship with Jaewon deepened into something that terrified and exhilarated her in equal measure. They spent nearly every night together, sometimes in his bed, just holding each other, other times talking until dawn about everything and nothing. He told her about growing up in his father's shadow, learning the family business through violence and intimidation. She told him about foster care, about feeling unwanted and invisible, about building herself from nothing. Michelle met more of Jaewon's world. His cousin Minho, who ran security operations. His associate Jin, who handled the legitimate business interests. They treated her with respect but also wariness, clearly unsure what to make of their boss's sudden relationship. One evening, Jaewon took her to dinner at an exclusive restaurant where the staff greeted him by name and led them to a private room. Michelle wore a dress he'd bought her, expensive and beautiful, and she felt like she was playing dress-up in someone else's life. "You're quiet," Jaewon observed, pouring her wine. "I'm just thinking about how surreal this all is. A month ago, I was sleeping on an air mattress, terrified to check my email. Now, I'm here with you, wearing designer clothes, drinking wine that probably costs more than my old rent. Does it bother you?" "Sometimes," she admitted. "I feel like Cinderella, but I'm waiting for midnight when the magic ends, and I'm back to being nobody." Jaewon reached across the table, taking her hand. "You were never nobody, Michelle. You're a survivor. You're strong and talented and so beautiful it hurts to look at you sometimes." His thumb traced circles on her palm. "And this isn't magic that's going to disappear. This is real." "How do you know?" "Because I've never felt like this before, never let anyone this close, never wanted someone the way I want you." His eyes burned into hers. "You've changed everything for me." Michelle's breath caught. "Jaewon, I'm falling in love with you," he said quietly. "I know it's fast, I know it's complicated, but it's true, and I needed you to know that." Her heart hammered against her ribs. She should be cautious, should protect herself, should not fall for a man whose world was built on danger. But when she looked at Jaewon, all she saw was someone who understood her in ways no one else ever had. "I'm falling in love with you too," she whispered, "and it terrifies me." "Good," he smiled, devastating and warm. "We can be terrified together." The kiss they shared was different from all the others, laden with promise and confession. When they left the restaurant that night, Michelle felt like she was walking on air, her hand clasped in Jaewon's, the city lights blurring around them. But happiness in Jaewon's world was always temporary. 3 days later, Michelle was working at his dining table when Junho arrived, his expression grim. The two men disappeared into the office, and when Jaewon emerged an hour later, she knew something was wrong. "What happened?" she asked, setting down her pen. "There's a situation with a rival organization. It's nothing for you to worry about." "Don't do that. Don't shut me out to protect me," Jaewon sighed, running a hand through his hair. "There's a group moving into our territory. They're young, reckless, and they want to make a name for themselves. One of the ways to do that is to go after me or people close to me. Fear spiked through Michelle. You think they'll come after me? I won't let them get that far. He crossed to her, kneeling beside her chair. But I need you to do something for me. Stay in the apartment for the next few days. Don't go out. Don't answer the door for anyone but me or Junho. Can you do that? You're scaring me. I know. And I'm sorry. But this is precautionary. I'm handling it. He kissed her forehead. I'll keep you safe, Michelle. I swear it. Michelle agreed, but the next 3 days were torture. Chaewon left early and came home late, exhaustion and tension written in every line of his body. She'd try to talk to him, but he'd deflect, claiming he didn't want to burden her with his world. It came to a head on the 4th night when he came home with blood on his shirt. Michelle had been dozing on the couch and jerked awake when she heard the door. Chaewon stood in the entryway, his expression carefully blank, but she saw the crimson staining his white shirt. Oh my God, are you hurt? She rushed to him, hands hovering over the blood. It's not mine, he started to turn away, but Michelle grabbed his arm. Talk to me, please. What happened? Michelle, don't! I love you! The words burst out of her, desperate and raw. I love you. And you're shutting me out, and I can't handle it. If we're going to do this, if we're going to be together, you have to let me in. All the way in. Jaewon's careful control cracked. He pulled her into his arms, holding her so tight she could barely breathe. I'm trying to protect you from this, from what I have to do, what I have to be. I don't need protecting from you. I need you to trust me enough to share this. Michelle pulled back enough to look at his face. What happened tonight? He was quiet for a long moment, and when he spoke, his voice was hollow. The rival organization sent someone to the office. They wanted to negotiate, but it was a setup. They tried to kill Junho. I stopped them. The blood is theirs. I'm not proud of what I did, Michelle, but they came into my place, threatened my people, and I couldn't let that stand. Michelle should have been horrified, should have run. Instead, she cupped his face, forcing him to meet her eyes. Did you have a choice? There's always a choice. No, there isn't. Not really. Not when it's your people's lives or theirs. She stroked his cheek. I'm not naive, Jaewon. I know what you are, what you do, and I love you anyway. So stop trying to spare me from reality and just be honest with me. Something in him broke. Chaewon buried his face in her neck, and she felt moisture against her skin. He was crying, this powerful, dangerous man coming apart in her arms, and Michelle held him through it, her own tears falling into his hair. I'm so tired, he whispered. I'm tired of the violence and the constant vigilance and never being able to let my guard down. Then let it down with me, here, just for tonight. Michelle guided him to the couch, and they collapsed together, tangled in each other. You don't have to be strong all the time. They stayed like that for hours, talking and crying and slowly piecing themselves back together. Chaewon told her about the night his father died, about taking over the organization at 26, about the impossible choices he'd made to keep his people safe. Michelle listened without judgment, offering comfort where she could. As dawn broke over the city, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, Jaewon kissed her softly. I don't deserve you, he murmured. Probably not, Michelle agreed with a small smile. But you're stuck with me anyway. Is that a promise? It's a threat, because I'm not going anywhere, Jaewon Kang. You're mine now, whether you like it or not. He laughed, the sound rusty but genuine. I more than like it. I need it. I need you. Good, because I need you too. The situation with the rival organization was resolved within the week. Michelle didn't ask for details, and Jaewon didn't offer them. But the tension that had been coiled in his shoulders eased, and he started coming home earlier, spending more time just being present with her. Michelle's business was thriving. She'd taken on bigger clients, her portfolio growing with each project. Jaewon had offered to invest in her work, but she'd refused, needing to maintain that independence. He'd respected that, even seemed proud of her for it. 2 months after they'd first met, Jaewon asked her to move into his apartment officially. Michelle had been spending all her time there anyway, her own apartment across the hall sitting empty except for the furniture she'd accumulated. "Are you sure?" she'd asked, even though her heart was screaming yes. "I've never been more sure of anything." He'd pulled her into his lap, his arms secure around her waist. "I want to wake up with you every morning. I want to come home to you every night. I want this to be our space, not mine." Michelle had said yes, and they'd spent the weekend moving her things across the hall. It wasn't much, but Jaewon made space for everything, clearing drawers and closet space, making sure she knew this was her home too. One night, curled up in bed together after making love for the first time, Michelle traced the tattoos on his arm. "What do they mean?" she asked. "They're family protection symbols. Each one represents someone I've lost or someone I'm protecting." He caught her hand, pressing a kiss to her palm. "I want to add something for you." "You don't have to do that. I want to. You're my family now, Michelle, the most important part." She'd cried then, overcome with emotion. Family had always been something other people had, something she'd watched from the outside. But here, in Jaewon's arms, she finally understood what it meant to belong. Life settled into a new rhythm. Michelle worked on her designs while Jaewon managed his empire, and they'd come together at the end of each day, sharing meals and stories and slow kisses that led to tangled sheets. She met his grandmother, a tiny woman with sharp eyes who'd grilled Michelle in Korean before deciding she approved. Jaewon had laughed at Michelle's nervousness, translating the grandmother's assessment. "She says you're good for me, that I smile more." "Do you?" Michelle had asked later, in the privacy of their bedroom. "Do I what?" "Smile more?" Jaewon had pulled her close, his expression soft. "I smile every time I look at you, every time I think about coming home to you, every time I realize you chose this, chose me despite everything you knew I was." "It's not despite anything," Michelle had corrected. "I chose you because of who you are, all of you, not just the parts that are easy to love." 6 months after Michelle had fled Newark, she received a message from an unknown number. Her heart had seized, memories of Marcus flooding back, but when she opened it, the message was from her old college roommate, Sarah. "I heard what happened with Marcus. I'm so sorry I didn't reach out sooner. If you ever want to talk, I'm here." Michelle had stared at the message for a long time before showing it to Jaewon. "I don't know if I'm ready for this," she'd admitted. "Ready for what? Reconnecting with your past? Ready to let people see how broken I was? She'd set the phone down. "Sarah knew me before Marcus. She'll see how much I changed. Or she'll see how much you've survived and rebuilt." Jaewon had taken her hand. "You're not broken, Michelle. You're stronger than you think. And if you want to reconnect with old friends, I support that. You don't have to hide anymore." Michelle had reached out to Sarah and they'd met for coffee. It had been awkward at first, 3 years of silence between them, but Sarah hadn't judged. Instead, she'd shared her own story of leaving an unhealthy relationship, and they'd bonded over their survival. "You seem happy," Sarah had observed, stirring her latte. "Different, but in a good way." "I am happy," Michelle had realized. "For the first time in years, I actually am." That night, she'd come home to find Jaewon waiting for her with dinner and flowers. "What's the occasion?" she'd asked. "No occasion. I just wanted to remind you that you deserve good things." He'd pulled her into his arms. "How was coffee with Sarah?" "Good. Really good, actually." Michelle had smiled up at him. "You were right. I'm stronger than I thought." "I'm always right," he'd teased, kissing her nose. "Don't push your luck, Kang." As the year mark of their relationship approached, Michelle found herself reflecting on how much had changed. She had a thriving business, real friendships, and a man who loved her with an intensity that still took her breath away. Juwan had slowly been transitioning more of his operations toward legitimate business, influenced by her presence in his life. "I want to build something clean for us," he'd told her one night. "Something that won't put you at risk, that I can be proud of." Michelle had been overwhelmed by that admission, by the knowledge that he was changing his entire world for her. "You don't have to do that for me," she'd said. "I'm not doing it just for you. I'm doing it for us, for the future I want to build with you." He'd gotten down on one knee then, pulling out a small box, and Michelle's heart had stopped. "Juwan, I know it's fast. I know this life is complicated and messy and sometimes terrifying, but I love you, Michelle Thompson. I love your strength and your kindness and the way you see the good in me, even when I can't see it myself." He'd opened the box, revealing a stunning ring. "Will you marry me?" Michelle had been crying before she could even process the question. "Yes," she'd sobbed. "Yes, of course, yes." They'd made love that night with a desperation born of relief and joy, both of them overwhelmed by the magnitude of what they'd found in each other. Afterward, lying tangled together, Michelle had traced the new tattoo on Juwan's chest, a small M surrounded by protective symbols. "When did you get this?" she'd asked. "Last week. I wanted to surprise you." He'd covered her hand with his. "You're permanently part of me now, Michelle, written on my skin and carved into my heart." The wedding was small and intimate, just close friends and family. Michelle wore a simple white dress, and Juwan cried when he saw her walking toward him. They'd exchanged vows they'd written themselves, promises of protection and partnership and love that would weather any storm. "I was running from one nightmare when I found you," Michelle had said through tears. "But you showed me that safety and love could exist together. That strength didn't have to mean control. You saved me, Juwan. But more than that, you helped me save myself." Juwan's voice had been rough when he'd replied. "You walked into my life and reminded me what it meant to be human, to feel something other than anger and duty. You're my redemption, Michelle, and I promise to spend every day proving I'm worthy of the gift you've given me." As they'd kissed to seal their marriage, Michelle had felt complete in a way she'd never imagined possible. This dangerous man with blood on his hands and love in his heart had become her home, her safety, her future. A year after their wedding, Michelle sat in the nursery they'd built in their expanded apartment, her hand resting on her swollen belly. Juwan had slowly extricated himself from the criminal elements of his business, transitioning fully into legitimate trade. It had been difficult, dangerous at times, but he'd been determined to build a safe world for their coming child. He found her there, standing by the window, watching the sunset paint the city gold. "You okay?" he asked, wrapping his arms around her from behind. "I was just thinking about that first night, when I was so scared, standing in the hallway with my key, afraid to even breathe." Michelle leaned back against him. "I never could have imagined it would lead to this." "Regrets?" His hand covered hers on her belly. "Not a single one." She turned in his arms, looking up at the man who'd become her everything. "You promised to protect me, and you did, but you also gave me so much more. You gave me a life, a family, a future. You gave me all of that too," Juwan murmured, kissing her softly. "I was existing before you, surviving, but you taught me how to live." Their daughter was born 3 months later, a perfect blend of both of them, and they named her Ji-hyun, meaning wisdom and virtue. Michelle held her in the hospital, marveling at the life they'd created, while Juwan looked at them both with such fierce love, it stole her breath. "I'm going to protect both of you," he'd sworn. "Nothing will ever hurt you, I promise." Michelle had believed him. because Jaewon Kang didn't make promises he couldn't keep, and he'd already proven that his love was the kind that moved mountains and destroyed threats and built entire new worlds. She'd come to Manhattan running from a monster, and she'd found a man who was willing to be monstrous in her defense. But more than that, she'd found someone who saw all of her, the broken pieces and the strong ones, and loved every part. As Michelle sat in their home, their daughter sleeping peacefully, Chaewon's arms around them both, she finally understood what freedom really meant. It wasn't just the absence of fear. It was the presence of love so strong it could rebuild a shattered soul. And she was finally completely free. Thank you so much for watching this story all the way to the end. If you enjoyed the journey, please show your love by hitting that like button, dropping a comment telling me your favorite part, and subscribing to the channel so you never miss another story. Your support means the world and helps me continue bringing you these epic romance tales. Until next time, family, stay blessed.